Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our live interactive Access Live event. My name is Robin, and I'll be moderating the call this evening. We host these events to give Congresswoman Pingree the chance to speak directly with you wherever you are and to reach as many of you and answer as many of your questions as possible. This evening, we'll be discussing the actions taken by the Trump administration and how Congresswoman Pingree is fighting for the people of Maine. Congresswoman Pingree will be joined by Maine Attorney General Elon Frey, who will provide insight into the legal pathways forward to fight the Trump administration's illegal actions. As I mentioned earlier, this is an interactive forum, and we'd love to hear from you this evening. We'll be taking as many questions from participants as we possibly can live on the call this evening. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. That staff member will take down your name and your question. The next time you hear your name, you'll be live on the call, and I'll be inviting you to ask your question directly to the Congresswoman. If you happen to be streaming the event on our website this evening, simply type your name and question below the streaming player. And if you'd like to be added to Congresswoman Chellie Pingree's e-newsletter, you can press *6 on your telephone keypad to be placed in line to provide your email address. We'll do our very best to answer as many questions as we possibly can this evening. We do receive a lot of questions on our live events, so if we're not able to address your question this evening, please leave a voicemail after the event, or you can send an email to rep.chellie.pingree@mail.house.gov, and I'll repeat that email throughout the call this evening. Again, if you have any questions throughout the event, please press *3 on your telephone keypad or type your question below the streaming player. And if you'd like to be added to Congresswoman Chellie Pingree's e-newsletter, please press *6 to be placed in line to provide your email address. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn the call over to Congresswoman Pingree. Congresswoman, you are live, and the floor is yours, ma'am.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for moderating. And thank you to everybody joining the call tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend a little time talking to all of us. We're just so glad to have you. I appreciate all of your interest in the challenges that we're facing, and to many of you for the actions that you yourself are taking. This is our second Tele-Town Hall, and we're so excited to have Elon Frey joining us tonight. And I will introduce him shortly, but we're really excited to have him here to also answer your questions. Many of you have asked us about doing an in-person town hall, and we weren't able to schedule one this month, but we're going to try to schedule 2 in the month of April. So please stay in touch. Watch for it on our website or our social media. We'd love to have you join us in person as well, and happy to take more of your questions. I think we all know this first 2 months of the Trump administration have been absolutely disastrous for our democracy. We've seen one after another of the president taking action through EOs, his executive orders. Many, if not most of them, have been illegal or unconstitutional, and he completely disregards the separation of powers, the important role that Congress plays. I call them illegal and unconstitutional because he's been blocking funds that should go to federal agencies, funds that have been authorized and appropriated by the Congress. That is our legal role, and he has no authority to do that. He's been cutting staff, many of them probationary without any kind of approval from Congress. We have a procedure that's required to be followed when the executive branch wants to cut staff. They have to give a justification and notify Congress beforehand. And you've seen many of these staff cuts in agencies like the Department of Agriculture, where some county offices have gone from 6 people down to 1. The Forest Service, where we're losing vital firefighters, Fish and Wildlife, Housing and Urban Development, the EPA, and of course the Department of Education, Social Security, and the Veterans Administration. He's attempting to eliminate full departments of the United States government, like USAID or the Department of Education. He has no power to close a department that was created by Congress, yet he's trying to do it by destroying the staffing levels there and cutting the funding. In the future, we expect him to try to do even more severe cuts through reconciliation process, which they've already gone through the first step in Congress, but their attempts there will be to cut Medicaid, which, as you know, serves our senior citizens, kids in Maine, moms with new babies. They're going to try to cut SNAP benefits to people who are going hungry, cut the entire Department of Education, which will be vital funds for teachers in our state, for special education, for Pell Grants and student loans. All of this is just to give more tax cuts to the wealthy or big corporations, not to go to deficit reduction, not to go to other portions of government. So we've been fighting back on every possible front, proposing legislation to fight them, trying to make sure that we keep the public informed virtually every single day of what's going on out there, asking questions, setting oversight letters, and fighting back using every tool we have in the toolbox. And one of the most important tools that we have is our legal strategy. We now have over 130 court cases going against his illegal activities, and with 50 of them so far, we have court-ordered stays going on. So we've been able to require them to open up some of those funding streams. We've been able to require them to reinstate some of those employees. And we're going to keep fighting every day until we win on each front. A lot of these legal fights are done by state attorney generals, by labor unions, by nonprofits, by interested individuals, and we're working very closely with all of them. Sometimes members of Congress sign on to amicus briefs or other kinds of strategies. We also just do a lot of back and forth conversation with our allies in the legal field to make sure that we're working on the very issues that we're fighting every day. So that's why I'm so excited to have Aaron Frey with us tonight. As all of you know, he's the Attorney General of the state of Maine. He's involved in many of these fights with his other Democratic Attorney Generals around the country. And if, Aaron, I could turn it over to you, maybe you could start by just talking a little bit about some of the lawsuits that Maine is involved in, some of them that you know that are going on, and a little bit of your thoughts about why we need this legal strategy and why it's been so critically important to fight back against this lawless administration.
Yeah, thanks very much, Congresswoman, and good evening to you and to everybody who's joined the call tonight. It really is a treat and a privilege that I can join with everyone here to talk about some of those concerns that we all have about what we see coming from Washington and the concerns we have about how this impacts, our day-to-day lives. As the Congresswoman pointed out, I do serve as Maine's Chief Legal Officer. It's my job to make sure that Maine and her citizens are well looked after and that the state's rights are protected and advanced. And as has already been described, what we see coming right now from the Trump administration, from members of the Trump administration, from the president himself, appears to be a disregard for what Congress, for what the Constitution have required our federal officers to abide by. I'm working with other attorneys general on a regular basis and have been for a while. We've been thinking a lot about how to best prepare ourselves for the potential of a president or of an administration that is unwilling to follow the law or is not feeling as though they have to be guided by what the Constitution or Congress directs. And so we've been thinking for a while about this, and we've been preparing to respond to what could be a range of different actions. I want to be crystal clear about this at the front end. I am not looking for a fight. I am not looking to sue someone. I'm not looking to sue the President of the United States. But I want to be very clear about something else. No one in our country is above the rule of law. Our Constitution, our statutes, the oath that every federal and state officer swears when they take their office is to follow the Constitution, is to follow the law. And so when there's a law that provides for certain rights, when there's a constitutional provision that protects someone, no one is above that law. You can go to Congress to try to change it. You can go to the court to have it interpreted. But what you can't do is you can't just say, I'm going to disregard it and do what I want to do. So as the Congresswoman pointed out, states attorneys general, organizations, federal workers, businesses, those who have been affected, we are all doing what we can when we are faced with what we believe is a violation of the law, where we are faced with what is an unlawful action by the President of the United States, we do what the Constitution provides for to address that harm, and that is go to court, go to the judicial branch, whose job it is to say what the law is and how it is to address harms that may be coming from when an officer like the president or his administration is not following the law. So as the Congresswoman pointed out, Maine has joined, I have joined for Maine, a number of different cases in an effort to protect the rights of Mainers, in order to protect the sovereignty and the rights of the state. It all started, it seems like forever ago, but it started 8 weeks ago when I joined litigation to defend birthright citizenship, a constitutional provision that for the last 150 years has been crystal clear about what that means. President Trump wanted to do something else, and so my colleagues and I, we went to court, and so far we've been able to successfully prevent that from being, from taking that executive order from taking effect. Similarly, when the Trump administration tried to freeze funding coming into the state, so tried to freeze funding that folks like Congresswoman Pingree had through Congress, guaranteed through congressional law, should go out to the states. When the president decided that he wasn't going to follow that congressional law, when he was going to unlawfully withhold that money, my colleagues and I, we went to court, and we were able to get the court to stop that from happening. We were able to get these temporary orders, these what are called temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions. These are orders that we can get at the front end that hold the status quo, that prevent the harm from happening while we work out in court what the law requires of all parties, what the rights are that are involved. I'm sure you all know, because you've probably been just as concerned as I am, President Trump has allowed an unelected billionaire, Elon Musk, through his Department of Government Efficiency, to go and run roughshod over our privacy rights by going into different agencies of government and just accessing information at his will. Look, we all agree that efficiency is important, but we deserve to have the Constitution and law followed. Putting an unelected billionaire in charge of private information of the state and of our citizens is not lawful, and so my colleagues and I have sued and have so far been successful at working to block DOJ from information that it might be taking in. And most recently, you probably saw, in fact, that we filed today for an order that sort of provided for the status quo. You probably saw that I joined litigation in order to try to protect the gutting of the Department of Education. There's this effort to try to circumvent Congress by the president, to gut DOE and stop it from doing the important work that Congress has directed DOE do. My colleagues and I, we expect better of our president. We expect better of those who have been entrusted with the role of government, and so we're working through the courts to protect the Department of Education. If Congress wants to do something else that's completely within the prerogative of Congress, the president does not make the law. The executive order is not the way in which to make law. And so that's just a taste of the work that we're doing. Let me also add, the work that's being done by non-state actors, by non-attorneys general. We are supporting them as best we can with Friends of the Court briefs. If you have a labor union who's trying to protect some of those, federal employees who are being laid off, we are filing supportive briefs to express to the court why it is the law supports helping out these federal employees. So look, I've talked a lot. I really do want to get to the questions because, that's an important way to hear from people and also, really get at what's on people's minds. Thank you, Congresswoman Pingree, for having me tonight, and looking forward to the questions.
Okay, well, let's get the party started, shall we? We've got, first up, we have Linda calling from Wells. Linda has a question about Social Security. Linda, you are live on the call with the Congresswoman and the Attorney General. Please go ahead and ask your question, Linda.
Yeah, thanks so much. I am wondering what we as U.S. citizens can do to assist in stopping this illegal behavior, especially the dismantling of the Social Security Administration.
Well, thank you, Linda. Really appreciate that question. I will say Social Security is one of my biggest worries. They've already had staff cuts. There have been office closures of the Social Security system. I've heard numbers as high as 50 of the people from DOGE are in there working on it. And, what we've heard from previous administrators is it's a big, complicated system with a lot of old programming there, and the idea that these guys are in there messing with the system just sounds like a lot of dangerous workers to me. They also have had access to your private information, your work history, your Social Security number, and there was just very recently a court order blocking their access to that and requiring them to dump any information that they had garnered from looking at your private information. I think we all know, whether you're a Mainer or from someone else, nobody has the right to look over your work history or have access to that information. They've spread a lot of myths, that there are 150-year-old people who are getting Social Security. They've done everything they can to try to, make you not trust the system. And I believe it's a very sinister motive. We heard Elon Musk saying that he thinks Social Security is a big Ponzi scheme, so clearly he's trying to discredit it. But I've worked with Republicans for a long time whose one big goal is to turn Social Security over to Wall Street. Let Wall Street manage your retirement benefits, and we know how dangerous that could be given the ups and downs of the market. This is a very secure system. You paid into the system. You deserve to receive the benefits. One of my other big concerns about this is because the Social Security Trust Fund is about $2.7 trillion. That's just the amount of money that President Trump is looking for to fund his tax cuts. It's about the amount that Elon Musk said that he would find in government cost savings, and he hasn't honestly found that many. So I worry that they're going to want to take over the trust fund. Once again, that is your money. They have no rights to it. You hear people talk about reforming of the system, and the Democrats have had a plan for quite a long time to take off the cap on how much people pay into Social Security. This would affect people who are making over $400,000, so have a legitimate reason that they should pay in more, and do a variety of other small changes, and we feel like the Social Security Trust Fund will be stable long into the future. So I think this is an important fight for us all to be aware, to fight back. They've already changed one of the rules that requires people to come into the office to verify certain benefit information. I mean, we're talking about senior citizens. We're talking about people who might live a distance from those offices. And these are offices that, while we haven't had any closures in Maine, we've had closures around the country. They're planning to close more. And they've had staff cuts, so they're not able to make as many appointments as they used to. So I know the Social Security employees are working as hard and as fast as they can, but they're doing it with one hand tied behind their back, and there are more cuts proposed. So I think this is an all-hands-on-deck situation. Whenever more actions are taken, we will do our best, again, to use the courts in any way we possibly can. But my feeling is, every action everyone takes is valuable. If you want to get 3 friends and hold some signs outside of your local Social Security Social Security office, that's great. If you want to make sure you contact every member of Congress and say you don't want to see them touch this, that's great. I think we all have to be very aware of what they're doing every day, and we're going to do our best to keep you informed about that, and absolutely fighting back every day. This is a vital part of our retirement system. When we developed Social Security, it brought millions of seniors out of poverty and gave people, well, it's never enough money, but it gave people an opportunity to have a little bit of security in their retirement. So we're going to keep fighting for you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The next question we have is Janet. Janet submitted her question online. This question is for you, Attorney General. Janet asks, what are the next steps if the administration refuses to honor court orders?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Janet. And I think it's something that we've all been sort of thinking about as we're watching what's happening in D.C. Let me give you the answer through an example. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the cases that I have joined for Maine is to protect congressionally directed funding flowing into Maine. The president, through an executive order, tried to stop the flow of funding that was promised to states like Maine. And so my colleagues and I, we went to court. We got an order from the court that said, while this case is pending, the money needs to continue to flow. And so what ended up happening is, while that did start the money flowing again because some money had been shut off, it ended up taking a little while for some of the different agencies that should have turned that money back on, that should have been sending that money back. It took a little bit for them to pay attention to that order. So what we do is first we work with the Department of Justice. We say, hey, look, we got a court order here. Your client's not in compliance. You got to turn that money back on. And we have been successful at when we remind about the court order, we have been successful at getting the administration to follow that order. In addition, where we've had some concern about whether or not the president or the administration might follow an order, we have gone back to court to seek additional orders, to seek additional prompting. And so far, at least as attorneys general, we have been successful. Now, look, the president and his administration are appealing those orders. That's perfectly appropriate in our system. But, that's the first part of my answer to when an order is not followed, what do? We've been able to get compliance with orders as we remind the administration about what they're supposed to be doing. The second part of my answer is, I think we all have a concern, legitimately so, given some of what has been communicated out by the president, by the vice president, by members of the administration about what they think about the court system, what they think about federal judges, what they think about, having to follow the law. We're watching, just yesterday there was an appellate argument in D.C. around the order that may have been violated relating to flights of certain people outside the country that President Trump was saying he had the ability to send out of the country, and there was an order that he not. There is a lot of work that's going to go into making sure that the president follows the law, and I'm not going to worry about this until we see citizens saying it's okay for the president not to follow the law. We're not there yet. I don't know that we're going to get there. Our Constitution is really, the citizens giving the government permission to act. It's the citizens who are saying, look, government, this is what we are allowing you to do. And I'm confident that there are attorneys general, there are governors, there are members of Congress, there's the Supreme Court, which even Chief Justice Roberts sort of came out and made an unusual statement recently, where he's like, "Hey, look, lay off judges here because judges need to be able to do their job without fear of being targeted by the administration." There's a lot of work that's going into making sure that as we defend our rights in court, as the Trump administration is ordered to act a certain way, so far we've been able to get what has been ordered to be followed. I'm confident we're going to continue to have success. I'm not worried that we're at a point yet where that's not going to happen.
Thank you, Attorney General. Our next caller is Claire from Sanford. Claire, you're live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with us. My question has to do with siding with Janet Mills as she stood up against Donald Trump and what is expected to become retaliation efforts on his part, and what is getting put in place to protect Maine and Maine citizens from the retaliation of the president because he doesn't like a governor standing up to him and enforcing the rule of law and not the rule of Trump.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I think we were all very proud of our governor for standing up for what she believed in, and I certainly can tell you that I heard a lot of praise of the state of Maine from many of my colleagues and others who I run into. Let's just go back a little bit to that day. So, the president brought it up at a luncheon with governors from around the country, and he outwardly spoke to Maine and said, Maine is not changing its policies in the way I want to. In this case, it was about transgendered athletes on school teams. And he said, Maine, what are you going to do about this? The governor said, I am following all state and federal laws, which is the job of a governor. He said, we are the law. I am the law, which, by the way, he is the president of the United States. He is actually required to carry out the laws passed by Congress. The executive order, as Attorney General Frey said earlier, do not carry the force of law, and they do have the durability of law. So Governor Mills said, I will see you in court, because he's talking about who's going to be on the right side of this. In America, that's how we settle our differences when it comes to government policy. Immediately, the executive branch started to retaliate. As you recall, it's been a couple of weeks, but immediately they cut off our Sea Grant funding, about $4.5 million that goes to coastal communities, that goes to our fishermen, that helps us with one of our most important industries and with some of the most difficult problems we've been facing. After letters and calls from everyone on the delegation, we were able to get that rescinded. Then second, we heard from the executive branch, and they said, every baby, we heard from the Social Security Administration, they said every baby born in Maine, we will no longer be willing to just certify that that baby was born in the hospital and give you a Social Security number. We're going to require that mother to go to the Social Security office. Remember, this is the very Social Security office we've already been discussing that is down on staff, closing offices, and they don't have enough time to register every baby in Maine. Plus, for those of you who recall, it's been a while since I had a baby, but I was in no mood to run to a Social Security office when I just wanted to get home with my baby. We heard from the acting administrator, Dudek, and he openly admitted, then I should say there was a big outcry. They changed the policy in a couple of days. And he openly admitted, look, I didn't like the way the governor, quote, treated the president, so I needed to retaliate. Let me just be 100% clear. The executive branch does not have the right to retaliate against any state for a policy, for an insult, for a non-insult, for any perceived slight. I mean, that's just unheard of. That's just unheard of. They rescinded that. Then they went on to block the UMO, the University of Maine System Research Funds. I think it was millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars. It goes to research for farmers on PFAS, so many of the things that we're doing. The University of Maine replied that they were following NCAA rules, which didn't go against what the president was asking for. They didn't have any trans athletes, and the president left them alone. But most recently, as you may have heard on Saturday, he said, I now need a full-throated apology. Who knows what a full-throated apology is? But anyway, he now demands that from our governor. And again, there's no provision in law that no matter what one politician, one state says to the other, the president is not allowed to block funding to our state under any circumstance because he would like an apology. We've seen him do this in a variety of ways. We saw him do it with Zelensky in the Oval Office. There's just no way to conduct an executive branch, and it's an embarrassment for our country. So we will continue to fight back at every turn, as you heard me say, in those first three block funds. Most of us in the delegation got right on top of it, made it public, made sure that we were, in a sense, embarrassing them in public when people saw what they were doing, making calls, do everything we possibly can, sending letters. We document what they're doing. And we're going to continue to fight back every step of the way. Once again, however you feel about a policy, the president does not have the power, just because of his executive order, to block funding to the states. Now, let's be clear. Congress can block funding to the states. I don't know if you all recall, but back when we passed the seatbelt law, Congress gave a certain number of years to states to comply with the seatbelt law, and after that time, you weren't allowed to get transportation funding. That can be a provision in the law, but it can't be an edict of a president because he feels a certain way one day. He can't do it because of policy. He can't do it because he feels he was insulted. I can't even, I could go on forever. I'm going to stop ranting. So, but I would love to ask the Attorney General for a minute. They are, they quote, did a sort of sham investigation of Health and Human Services and the Department of Education. They spent 2 or 3 days doing that when normally it takes months. They didn't do any interviews in our state. Now there's a 10-day period where they say they're going to take some other legal action against our Department of Education. Attorney General, I'm sure you guys are talking a lot about what the legal strategy will be of our state, and I don't think you need to, reveal anything to us in a future, sort of legal thing. But can you explain a little bit of where we are in this process, and if there is any process, or if once again this is just kind of a sham activity on the part of this administration?
Yeah, well, I can offer sort of the highlight to what you just laid out, Congresswoman, because to the extent that Claire was asking a question about the targeting or the way in which Maine may have been put in the crosshairs because of the president being reminded that he is not the law. We do have a situation where we have a federal administration that appears to be trying to please the president by targeting Maine and programs in Maine. And so, Congressman, as you pointed out, there were a couple of investigations, one from the Department of Health and Human the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, and one from the Federal Department of Education, in which they were very quickly after the exchange between Governor Mills and President Trump, Maine starts getting these letters indicating that there's some sort of violation. Now, it was a blow-through process. I mean, this, having been Attorney General for 7 years now, I have been involved when a federal agency has some questions, concerns about Maine's compliance with a federal program. Never have we had a situation where apparent on everything that's presented is they've already made their decision. They blew through any process that they were supposed to follow under the law, and now we're at this point where there's this deadline that they've put on the state to make some decision. As was indicated earlier, we are a nation of laws. There are policies in place that if the president, if his administration, if they have some rationale, there's a process through which they can go through in order to address what might be a wrong that they want to talk about. But it seems as though the process here, it's hard not to see it as something that's been motivated by this desire to effectuate revenge or effectuate some sort of animus that the president has for the state of Maine. So, I mean, we're engaged. We are the state's attorney. We are working with the affected agencies. Let me add something else, by the way. To be clear, this targeting of Maine is not just hurting Democrats, right? It's not just hurting Governor Mills. It's hurting Republicans. It's hurting independents. It's hurting Greens. It's hurting Democrats. It's hurting old. It's hurting young. This is hurting the people of Maine, and the fact that the people of Maine seem to be indispensable pawns for the President of the United States so that he can demand an apology, I don't know about you, but that has never been okay, and I'm not quite sure that there's a lot of justification for a president using this power to drive his own personal agenda.
Thank you, Attorney General. Our next caller is Kyle from South Berwick. Kyle, you are live on the call with the Congresswoman and the Attorney General. Please go ahead and ask your question, Kyle.
Thank you. Thank you for taking our calls, too. And I think my question sort of dovetails into the last couple that have just come up. Thank you for all the fighting that you're doing, Attorney General Frey and Congresswoman Pingree. It just feels like it is Democrats against Republicans. And I haven't really heard anything that would suggest that we're getting any Republican support, anywhere in all of this, right? It sounds like there's just that line of division, and the President Trump attacks, cuts funding, cuts the Sea Grant funding, does all those things. We fight back. It's all illegal, and it feels like the Republican Party is either not doing anything, agreeing with it. But either one is totally unacceptable, and I'm wondering what it is we're doing to correct that.
Thanks, Kyle. I think that's a great question because we do focus a lot on the Democrats, what the Democrats are doing, how we're fighting back. But, this is truly the Republicans who are in the majority in the House and the Senate sitting on the sidelines. And I would say we're working in every possible way to get our Republican colleagues to work with us. The vote difference in the House right now, I think, is just 3 votes. So we're going to have a huge bill coming up before us, this reconciliation, major cut bill. And we are working as hard as we can to figure out how to get 3 Republicans to go along with us. Some of that is just trying to, do it on the positive side, be friendly, and work with them. I'll just give you a couple examples. I'm the ranking member on the Interior and Environment Subcommittee of Appropriations. I work really closely with my Republican chair who's a nice guy, Mike Simpson from Idaho. We have always had a lot of things in common. We control the budget of several agencies, Department of Interior, National Parks, the arts agencies, the Department of Environmental Protection. And, I talk to him virtually every day, multiple times a day. And he and I agree on many of the things that are going wrong with this process, with the DOGE, with the way the cuts are being made. And so I want to just say that I am trying my best to maintain a friendly relationship and continue to do the things that are friendly and that we can do together. And I'm hoping that, when we get further down the line, we'll find some levels of agreement on these budgets. I think one of the big challenges, and I can't really speak for him, but for many of the Republicans who are reasonable, who often, want to make governing go first, is that they're being cut out of this process too. If I ask him to get more information about the potential cuts to the EPA, he doesn't have any better access to this administration than I do. And I try to get my Republican colleagues to fight for the institution, to fight for the separation of powers. This isn't a partisan thing. We're both responsible for the next big cut at the EPA, and we want to make sure that they're cutting employees who really don't play a critical role, who won't be a huge loss. And so I try to sort of use my sort of rational argument. I will say another way that a lot of my colleagues are trying to persuade Republicans is to hold town meetings in Republican districts. And while this might be seen maybe as a little bit aggressive, on the other hand, I think we all see it as a process of education. When you go into a Republican district and 1,000 people show up and you're explaining to them, why these cuts of probationary employees are really damaging to the Park Service or to the Forest Service or to their agricultural district or to the Department of Education, how it's going to cut teachers in their schools and special ed programs. I think we see it all as a process of education. Those constituents will go home, call their Republican members of Congress and say, hey, I don't want you to make these big budget cuts. We're talking to people about Medicaid and what this reconciliation bill will do to Medicaid cuts. And sometimes you have to go directly into Republican districts. If they're not telling their constituents, we can do that. And eventually their constituents will convince them, hey, it's more important that you do the right thing than go along with what is happening in the Trump administration. I think we're at a critical moment in our country that many of the things in our system aren't working in our favor. The fact is that many of these Republicans who go against, even say the slightest thing against Donald Trump, and you've seen what he's doing with Governor Mills, he gets angry, he demands an apology, or he says, I'm going to find a primary opponent for you, and Elon Musk is going to pour tens of millions of dollars into your district. And if we had campaign finance reform, you wouldn't have an unelected billionaire who's not only making money off of government contracts, but can also put money in unlimited amounts into primary races, into that judicial race in Wisconsin. And so they have the power right now of both threatening but also putting money behind it. So I think that is one way our system is failing us and making this extremely difficult. But I wholeheartedly agree. We need 3 votes at least to stop that reconciliation bill that will cut Medicaid. And, we just need our system to be functioning again. So thanks for your call. It's a very good question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Folks, please remember to press *3 on your telephone keypad if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're enjoying this update and you'd like to stay informed, I encourage you to press *6 on your telephone keypad now to sign up for the Congresswoman's e-newsletter. Congresswoman, your next question comes from Roger of Clinton. Roger, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Congresswoman. The Morning Sentinel announced on March 13th of this year that Northern Lights Inland Hospital was going to be closing to patient care on May 27th. This hospital's been open for 82 years, since the middle of World War II, during the fight against fascism. 300 full-time healthcare workers are going to lose their jobs. And this is, what can we do about this? Because here we have a corporate hospital chain arbitrarily closing long-standing hospital that provides essential services to central Maine here.
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you for calling in. I am just heartbroken to hear about that hospital closing. And I'm just so sorry for the residents of that area because I know how vital it is to have a hospital in your home community. It's going to mean greater distance for people, and as you say, tremendous job cuts. But just, it's just undermining the fabric of our rural communities when we lose our rural hospitals. And this has been an ongoing problem in the state of Maine. We've heard in an ongoing way from the hospital systems about the crushing financial burden that they're bearing. I don't think there's any hospital that wants to shut down. It's always an economic problem. And we are fighting on every single front. And I'll just tell you, some of the things that we could do to make sure hospitals can stay open are make sure that we don't allow the Republicans to cut the $900 billion in Medicaid that they're planning to do. Our hospitals are dependent on Medicaid to stay away from charity care so that they're not paying the burden of people who don't have money. Medicaid has been able to cover a lot of people. The subsidies to the Affordable Care Act mean a lot more people in Maine are covered, so when they're going into the hospital, they actually have health insurance. I've been working to try to reform the Medicare Advantage system. I've heard hospitals saying that most recently, because many of the Medicare Advantage programs might sound like a good deal to the senior, but they often don't cover much of the care that a sick senior citizen needs, and so hospitals are left holding the bag. So those are really important things to fight on right now. We also have a lot of bipartisan things that we've been trying to work on, helping to get more of a workforce. Many of the hospitals are struggling with not enough workers, and that can sometimes be related to our broken immigration system and how difficult it is for people to get work permits or to be able to work in this country. We need to make telehealth permanent because many of these hospitals are also able to serve people at a distance because they can use telehealth. We need to have sufficient mental and behavioral health funding. Much of that is being cut, and we're desperately worried about the cuts that are going to come into the future. I think there are a lot of other creative ways we can fund hospitals in rural areas, and I'm just really worried. We faced some cuts in the last budget, in this continuing resolution, and now this new administration. I think some of these things are really, really going to be challenged, and I'm worried. I would love to find a way to keep Northern Lights open, but really I'm worried about even more hospitals that are going to close in the future if we cut Medicaid and we don't do something about Medicare Advantage. So thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next question is from Michelle of South Portland. Michelle, you're live on the call with Congresswoman Pingree. Please go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you allowing people to sit in on your meetings and to be able to talk their concerns. I just don't understand why the president is doing what he's doing. He knows he's hurting us. I'm an elder person. Elder, I guess I really should say. If he took Medicaid away from me, I'd be living in one of the tents in one of the tent cities. That just is not, and he'd be knocking on my zipper saying, get out, get out. That just doesn't make sense to me. What's going on in his head? And why is Musk even involved in any of it? He wasn't voted in by.
Did we lose Michelle?
Pardon?
Okay, I'll give you, so thank you for your question. I think I've heard it all. So thank you very much, Michelle. I really, really appreciate you calling in. And you're right, why? I can't explain the president's behavior. Let me just start with that. But it is a very good question because many of his actions are disproportionately harming our seniors. We've talked about the potential for Social Security cuts, which is a vital lifeline for so many seniors. You brought up Medicaid. The average senior citizen who moves into assisted living or a nursing home has about 6 months left of their savings to get them through it. But then they're on Medicaid, and they might be on Medicaid for years. It is the principal way we pay for seniors' health care. It's just critically it's for seniors living, for making sure that they can be in long-term care. We also know that they're proposing in this reconciliation bill SNAP benefit cuts. And for many senior citizens, just the benefit of a SNAP card, it's never more than $6 a day, but it's that much to buy extra groceries, to get some fresh fruits and vegetables, to supplement what you're living on. So without these vital programs, all of which are targeted, you're right. I'm sorry to say it was quite an illusion. You said the president would be knocking on the zipper of your tent, but I don't know. It's a crazy idea that we would want our seniors to be homeless, and we would want them not to be rewarded for the great work that they've done throughout their lives and the major contribution they've made to our state. So we're going to be fighting back on every front, on Medicaid, on Social Security, and I really, really thank you for your question. I thought I might just quickly ask one question of the Attorney General. You can help me out a little bit on this call. You know, I think my Republican colleagues are going to put a bill on the floor next week to try to curtail the power of the federal courts. You've heard Donald Trump say he wants to impeach judges who would go against him. Luckily, Chief Justice Roberts actually, made a point of saying we don't impeach judges if we don't agree with their rulings. We appeal it in court. But there are several lawmakers on the Republican side who have said that they are filing impeachment motions, and now they're talking about having a bill on the floor. I think the way their bill would work is to say that they would limit a ruling of a federal district court and say that it can't be a nationwide ruling. I don't want to put you on the spot, Aaron, but maybe you have some ideas about this bill and what action Congress should take on it. I mean, I know I'll not be in favor of it, but it's interesting, what are they thinking?
Well, so you're right that the answer is going to be, my suggestion would be that the bill not pass, right? I don't know that that's the constructive, but taking the question more seriously, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is that going by your description, I'm not sure what it is they think they're going to accomplish. Judicial review is entrusted in the judicial branch, right? Like that is a constitutional function of the government. I just want to read a line. In sort of thinking about today, there's this line from the seminal case, Marbury versus Madison. This is the case from 1803 that established judicial review in that it is the providence of the court to make these decisions. I think that this sentence, it stuck out to me. I think it's valuable in helping answer the question. The sentence from that opinion is, the very essence of civil liberty certainly consists in the right of every individual to claim the protection of the laws whenever he receives an injury. People go to court when they believe that their rights have been violated. It is the job, indeed, it's the constitutional duty of the court. It is their obligation to address when rights may be abridged, when there needs to be an ordering, where there's a dispute between parties. And so this idea that there are members of Congress who think that they might be able to put in a bill that divests the court of a job that was entrusted to the court through the Constitution, it seems like it's a waste of time. And frankly, I think they forget that when President Biden was president, there were a lot of people going to court to have their rights sort of worked out vis-a-vis the president. So, it seems like it's short-sighted. It seems like it completely forgets what we learned. Golly, was it like in sixth grade? When was history, I guess, like elementary school? We learned about these things very early on. I don't know why they would do it. Seems like a waste of time. And by the way, impeaching people because they make decisions that you don't like, starts with judges, but then what, right? It seems like it's a lot of energy that is not focused on lowering the price of eggs and groceries, making sure that educational standards are being met, making sure that we have families can be raising their families without having to worry about how they're going to send their children to college. Seems like there's a lot of other things that maybe they could be focused on.
Thank you, Attorney General. Our next caller is the Honorable Karen Heck. Attorney General, this question is for you.
Oh, thank you, Chellie. Thank you so much for having these conversations. It's really important, and I'm disappointed that the others aren't doing that. But Attorney General, I'm very worried that there is no mechanism for enforcing court orders when the Justice Department and the Fed and the FBI are under the president's control. And we could see that with what happened with the military or with the extradition of Venezuelans with no due process when the order was mocked and ignored. And I'm just wondering, is it up to the military? What is going to be the ultimate decider here? People in the streets are great, and we're working constantly to get people out on the 5th of April. But what actually will enforce these laws that they decide not to follow, or decisions?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Karen. Thinking in watching what's going on with this case down in D.C., right, that involves the deportation of a large number of people, arguably in conflict. I mean, they're litigating right now about how much in conflict the not following the order might have been. But breaking down what your question was, so we have a court. It'll issue an order. The expectation is that there will be people available, there'll be law enforcement available, there'll be some actor that's available to see to the enforcement of that action. As your question points out, some of those people who are responsible for seeing to it that the orders are enforced are under the control of the President of the United States, right? And so it raises the question of, well, what happens if the President tells, like, say, for example, the marshals, the Federal Marshal Service, hey, don't enforce that order. Or if the President directs members of administration don't follow that order. The court, the judicial branch, does have a number of tools at its that are available to it to work to see that an order gets enforced, whether it be through some sort of sanction, whether it be financial or through jail. Now, look, you might not be able to order the president to pay a fine or order the president to jail, but there are a lot of other people who are in the chain who are not going to have the same protection that the president might have from a court issuing some sort of sanction or some sort of order. So I say that in a very general way. There is going to be a lot of work as the court makes certain orders to ensure that those who swore an oath to follow the law and follow the Constitution follow those orders. And the court does have the tools in its toolbox to do that. The court has to be careful, though, not to make sure it's crossing all of its T's and dotting all of its I's. I think that's what we're seeing going on right now in the action in D.C. because, in terms of the legitimacy of the court action, in terms of having the public support for what the court might do, there really has to be a very thoughtful, transparent process in which it's clearly identified what the order was, it's identified what should have happened, and need to give the person who should have followed that order the opportunity to comply. I'm not at the point yet where I believe that noncompliance is going to lead to some sort of crisis. I do think that when you start getting at federal officials, not the president, but when you get at the people who are going to be hauled into court and forced to answer for their unwillingness to follow court orders, I think we would start to see something different happening if they need to respond to a judge and not just pop off on X, right? Like, that's what we're seeing now. I do think the courts are making sure that when they issue an order, they're preparing for using all of the tools in their toolbox to seek compliance. That's what I'm thinking, Karen. But again, I understand that if you play it all out and you get to the point where, a person is just not following a court order, I think we're going to have a very serious conversation about where this leaves us if people are willing to allow that to stand.
Thank you, Attorney General Frey. We've got time for one last question. We've got Crystal from Scarborough. Crystal, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman and the Attorney General. Please go ahead and ask your question, Crystal.
Hi. Thank you for taking my phone call. I have a daughter who's 12 who has Down syndrome. Very concerned about her medical and her schooling with the cuts to Medicaid and Department of Education. You can tell this has been very stressful for me. I'm just curious, what does our future look like right now?
Karen, thank you, or Crystal, thank you so much for your call, and thank you for telling us about your lovely daughter. I have no doubt that you are a wonderful mother, and I can understand absolutely why you are concerned. These cuts to the Department of Education and Medicaid could be very damaging for people in our communities, and I'm worried about them too. As you know, many kids get assistance through Medicaid even if their parents have health care, because it often covers services that they don't get through their regular health care program, so Medicaid is a vital service. And the Department of Education, where we're already seeing the dismantling of this department, supplies Maine with money for special education. So this is vital funding. About $70 million, I think, comes into our state. We also get money for Title I teachers. There are about 1,000 teachers who will lose their jobs if this funding is cut, and many of them are the teachers who help out in a classroom so that every kid gets the attention that they deserve. We consider it a vital service. We want to make sure that every kid gets a good education and they're allowed that opportunity to thrive, and I'm sure your daughter does well in school because she has that extra assistance and she gets the medical care. People often talk about the Department of Education and they say, oh, it's a bloated department, we don't need all those people. But this is, in fact, what they're doing. Another important service of the Federal Department of Education is if you don't feel like you're getting the vital services that you need, you have the right to appeal to the Department of Education, and they will take on your case in your home district. There are 20,000 cases this year at the Department of Education. They will be eliminated with the elimination of this department. I got my start on a local school board, and maybe this is a good way to be able to end the call, but that was a vital education for me, for understanding the cost of putting our kids through school, the important role that our communities play. Donald Trump likes to say we're turning education back over to the states. We already have local control. We decide the curriculums. We decide who our teachers will be. But we need that federal funding. If we don't get that federal funding, some of these services will be cut, or it will be turned over to property taxes, and in many of our communities, they can't afford to spend anymore. So this is critically important. I really appreciate you telling that story because it helps people to understand that this isn't just a, sort of nameless, faceless department of government that we should all eliminate. These are the services that our friends and neighbors get every day. These are the property taxes that each of us pay as individuals. And this is incredibly important. So this is a vital fight for all of us to be in. Thank you all for taking your time to be with me today and to talk about this. We'll look forward to our next call and our next in-person event. And please contact our office if you have questions, if you have comments. And please keep fighting back on your own. It's really important that everybody stands up and everybody is in the fight. But thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Attorney General Frey. We've done our very best to answer as many questions as possible this evening. If we were not able to address your question, please stay on the line and leave a voicemail after the event, or you can send us an email at rep.chellie.pingree@mail.house.gov. And to reach our Maine District office, you can call 207-774-5019. Thank you so much for joining the call this evening. Good night. God bless.